Now, while the world focuses on whether or not Iran can gain nuclear capabilities, there is an honest conversation, and it is being had, and the words are being uttered in places like Israel, and even from the United States Senate, that what the focus should be is on regime change in Iran. Now, the United States has embarked on regime change over the last several decades, much to be received with failure, because when you rip the top off of something, even when that something is oppressive, you need to know what exists underneath. What have you unleashed? We learned the hard way in Iraq. We learned the hard way in Afghanistan, in Syria, and in Libya. So it's worth answering the question, if you rip the top off of Iran and its oppressive leadership, the Ayatollah, what exists underneath in Iran? What would happen after regime change? Would it be an open wound that pushes refugees into Europe or breeds terror that washes back ashore in the United States? Let's take a look. First of all, here's the ethnic, religious, and political breakdown of Iran. We often hear Iran is a Persian country, and that's true. 61% of the population, in fact, is Persian. But a good 20% of the population is under the ethnic breakdown of roughly Turkic. That's Azeri, Kurd, and many other minorities within Iran, including 2% Arab. But what about religious divides? We've seen that. Even in ethnic populations where there is some cohesion, in other parts of the Middle East, there are ethnic divides. Less so, by the way, in Iran. 98.5% of the population in Iran is Muslim, and the vast, vast majority of that Muslim population is Shia. That's important because you remember in Iraq, there was immediate chaos and civil war between Sunni Muslims and Shia Muslims. Not such a big divide in Iran, although there is both a Jewish and Christian population in that country. And then what about the population and what it is in terms of minorities? Well, there are minority groups, as I mentioned, in Iran, but they largely are dominated by Persian and Shia Muslim majorities. Minorities there face poverty, discrimination, poor access to government services. They're forbidden to educate children in their native languages, and that comes as almost 40% of the country's citizens aren't even fluent in the Persian language. So that's a little bit of what exists inside of Iran. If you remove the top, what is unleashed? Is it secular? Is it cosmopolitan? Is it ready to join the world? Or is it yet another hard lesson that we would learn like we did in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria? Let's ask someone who lived in Iran for 23 years. Joining me now is Iranian activist Sana Ibrahimi. Sana, thank you so much for being with me here today. 23 years you lived in Iran. I'd love to hear your experience. What is that country like? How is it, do you think, how ready is it to embrace the modern world if there were different leadership for Iran?
Mm-hmm. As you said, I lived 23 years of Iran, so what I'm saying is not speculation or an outsider's perspective. This is my lived experiences. Let me be clear. Islamic Republic is a terrorist organization that has taken our nation hostage for the past 46 years and has ruled through fear, arresting, kidnapping, torturing, and killing our people since day one. And let me be absolutely direct. The people of Iran are not the regime. We are nothing like them. And we have shown that through uprisings throughout the years since the beginning of the regime in 1999, 2008, 2019, 2022. And every time the Islamic Republic has responded brutally. Take 2019. In 3 days of complete shutdown, they cracked down on people and killed 1,500 unarmed civilians. But people have shown clearly that they are ready for a new regime. They are ready for freedom and taking their country back.
Sana, I appreciate that perspective, and I have no doubt of its veracity. You have the lived experience, as you just explained. And there has been indications that we have evidence, even on our side of the globe, that the Iranian people do not want to live under the Ayatollah. The question then, though, does still remain, and it's one that everyone has to ask in analyzing what comes after the Islamic Republic. Is it your sense that the population, while perhaps, to your point, a majority are unified, is opposed to the Ayatollah, they're ready to come together in some sense of coalesced government? Or are there tensions inside the population that could be unleashed if you take away even an oppressive controlling mechanism like the Ayatollah?
So what we've seen so far is that the nation, when it comes to uprisings, come together on these issues. Mahsa Amini was a Kurdish girl who was killed, and from Tehran to Zahedan, Baluch people, Kurdish people, Turks, they all rise together. So we've seen this. We have evidence that when it comes to the integrity of the country, people are all united together against the government. Would it be challenges after the Islamic Republic? Yes, it would be. It would not be easy. But what we have seen and lived it for the past 46 years is that we do not want to live under the regime, and we know how bad it can get. And right at this point, the main fear comes from the fact that people think, what if this war stops now with a deal or any other alternative while the Islamic Republic remains in power, and how they can react after this? We have evidence. We have evidence how after each time they get hit from the outside, they turn inward, they turn their vengeance on the people. People are their collateral damage, and they break down. And they start mass executions, mass arrests. Right now, what we are observing is that as the military sites are getting bombed, on the floor of the parliament, the government is talking about mass executions after this, just in a show of strength. Right. So to your question, yes, we are aware of the challenges that might come our way after the Islamic Republic is gone. But here right now is our lifeline. This is life or death. First, facing the government.
One last question, Sana. I'm well over time, but this conversation is too important and too revealing. If a regime change opportunity in Iran would have to eventually come from within, as you point out, it would have to come from the people rising up under conditions where they thought they could actually accomplish victory. There's probably some fear, to your point, to begin that process if you don't think you can pull off victory because of the severe repercussions afterwards. So what do you think the ground would need to look like for the people to begin that process themselves in Iran?
Right now, Iranian people are completely, their internet is completely cut off, and they don't have connection to the outside world. So they don't see all the damages that all the bombings has caused the Islamic Republic. I believe they are still in a state of fear and shock. They still cannot completely comprehend how weak the government is. They first need to feel safe enough to come out, and then after that, get an indication of the government being weak enough so that they cannot crack down on people, just like the past uprisings when they oppressed people and the mass arrests and all that started.
Okay. What a fascinating conversation, Sana. You have a unique perspective, obviously, that you brought to us here today, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
An important conversation, one that is necessary. Look forward. What happens after the action right in front of your nose? It's the question we didn't ask for too long that we hope we're asking appropriately here today, together.